Hello and welcome to this episode of the podcast. This is the podcast where we talk to entrepreneurs, business owners and founders about some of the tough times they've had to push through. And today's guest is Holly Tattersall. Now, Holly runs an international community called Women in Digital, who are focused on helping women upskill by providing a platform for like-minded people to interact. They also run a lot of events and provide mentoring services. Women in Digital is in multiple locations all over the world now, including the US, Israel, and the UK, and of course Australia. But it wasn't always so easy for Holly. So we're going to talk about a few of the tough times she had to go through. And before we get into the full interview, I'm just going to give you a sneak peek of a story Holly had to share.
One of my digital marketing roles, I was reporting into a CTO who knew what I was doing with Women in Digital and knew where I was taking it.
Yep.
And he said to me, I don't get this whole diversity thing. What's it all about? At the end of the day, it just doesn't make sense. You've got a man and you've got a woman. They both go to learn programming, for example.
Yep.
And in a year's time, the man's just going to be a better programmer.
Yeah.
It just, their brains are hardwired to think more rationally. And I was absolutely dumbfounded by that.
Yeah.
I actually just didn't bother really responding. I said,
Yep.
I don't actually agree with that. And I think, your opinion is quite naive.
Mm-hmm.
But
were you angry?
Yeah, I was quite angry. I really was, because that's just blatant discrimination and, so condescending, so
Unfounded.
incredibly
Yeah.
condescending.
Yeah.
But, some people just have their inbuilt assumptions.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to the Be The Push podcast. My name is Jack Ferguson and I'm going to be sharing with you stories of how business owners and entrepreneurs had to push through the hard times in their careers. We're going to be discussing the lessons learned from these experiences while arming you with actionable advice so you can be the push when you need it most. Show notes can be found at bethepush.com/podcast and clicking on the relevant episode link. Let's get started. So we have that story coming up amongst many others in this episode. We start off by talking about Holly's early career and how she went over to South America to start a company, some of the challenges that went along with that, and what that set in motion for the rest of her career, what that taught her, what the lessons were from that. We then move on to Holly's digital recruiting firm, Digital Talent Co. And I asked a few questions around the stigma that we sometimes hear recruiters getting, especially in the tech and digital space, and how Holly deals with that. Of course, we're talking to the founder of Women in Digital, so we have to talk about diversity. But it was interesting to note that Holly talked about some of the catch-22s that go along with diversity, and there were certainly things that I hadn't thought of before. So that's coming up in this episode. Before we get into it, the last thing I want to tell you about is how we speak about choosing the right people to work with and how that can go wrong if you don't do your due diligence. Holly's had a couple of experiences where she chose the wrong person to work with, and we'll talk about that in this episode as well. So today we're here with Holly Tattersall. Holly, how are you going?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great.
So good.
So Holly, you're the founder of Women in Digital, and you also run Digital Talent Co.
Yeah.
Before we get into all that, let's hear about what your careers look like today. Can you take us back to the start and tell us where it all began?
Sure. So I at school never really knew what I wanted to do. I was always so jealous of all those people who, wanted to be doctors or vets or this or that. And, I bounced from one idea to another. So I decided to do business. It has, a good base, a good professional base. Mm-hmm. Went to UQ, did Bachelor of Business. I majored in International Business and HR.
Yep.
Really loved the HR side of things and was so passionate about international travel and working with different cultures, which I think came from my upbringing. So I'd actually, I was born in Papua New Guinea and then spent the first few years of school in Fiji. And then we went to New Zealand and then moved to Australia. So I've always been, surrounded by different cultures and had a very open-minded family.
Cool.
So I loved the international business side of things and always knew that I would hold on to that.
Yep.
So once I finished, I was, dying to go traveling and, get the itchy feet out of my system. So went backpacking with a group of friends through Central and South America because I knew I wasn't ready to really knuckle down and start a professional career.
Yep. What were you like in school? Were you a good student?
I was pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even if I say so myself.
Yeah. I mean, when I say pretty good, I had good friends around me who would, we'd get together for study dates and I'd be like, at midnight I'm checking out, and they would stay up another hour or two than me. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't the most diligent student, but I knew, I needed to get through it. Mm-hmm. Well, how were you as a student?
I was good.
Yeah.
Back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a good
you
little nerd.
You sound surprised.
Oh.
You're like, I was good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just probably not as I don't work as hard anymore. I worked really hard in school. I got good grades.
It's like life. You put the hard yards in early, and now you're cruising.
Yeah, but I was such a nerd. So
were you?
Yeah. Now I do other fun stuff as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's easy when you don't do anything. You just study.
When you don't have a social life,
Yeah.
Your parents would have been so happy.
Yeah. They were proud.
Yeah. Or our good little nerd.
Yeah.
No, my parents probably wished that I was more diligent, but got there in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I, after I did a bit of backpacking with a group of friends, ended up landing in Colombia, in Bogota. It was December of 2010. And so decided to work in a bar for a couple of years. For a couple of months. It wasn't a couple of years. A couple of months while we were in Colombia, just to, learn a bit of Spanish, get to know the locals. Mm-hmm. And so we were in this one particular hotel working in a bar. It was so much fun. And after about 4 months of partying, getting to know the locals, and our Spanish was, it was getting there. Mm-hmm. Decided that it was probably time to grow up. There wasn't much of a future being the mojito master in Bogota.
Right. You make good mojitos?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
okay. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. It is Christmas. So, after about 4 months, ended up coming back to Australia and wanted to get an office job. Basically got into the first job I could find. So it was a procurement role, and just found it really quite dry. And was still in contact with the hotel owners, and they said, well, we know you don't want to work at a bar for the rest of your life. You're probably destined for a little bit more than that.
Yep.
We've got all these contacts across Colombia, and we've always talked about opening like a tour company or something. Mm-hmm. Would you be interested in coming back? You can add your Western sort of flair to it. You've got obviously reasonable English. Yep. And maybe we can work together on the social media side of things and bring families from the US, from Canada, from Australia, cool. And run tours around Colombia. And to me, that sounded like an absolute dream job.
Actually sounds exciting, right?
Yeah.
Compared to the office job.
Yeah. I mean, the choice was really hard. And I was really lucky that, my dad was really open-minded, and he said, well, Holly, you're young. If it doesn't work out, at least you will have tried. If it does work out, you'll have a job that will keep you happy for, at least the next 10 years. Yep. It could be really lucrative. Like, give it a go.
Yep.
So moved back there, spent a year and a half running tours around Colombia. We bought a new van so that we could run these tours around Bogota to, they've got these different like salt cathedrals. They've got these beautiful lakes around Bogota. We went on coffee tours. Yep. And then also had an offering to take people around Colombia. So go up to, the coast, to Cartagena, Santa Marta, and there's some beautiful, big, Spanish castles up there. The beaches are glorious. And then, take people around to the coffee region.
I can see why people came over.
Yeah.
And went on these tours.
It was really fun. I suppose at that stage, the company, it just didn't have the structure that it needed to, though. Like we've spoken about before, I wanted to get the company registered. I wanted to have real structure. I wanted to build the equivalent of Flight Center in Colombia.
Right.
And it just didn't get to that stage. It took us 6 months to register the business because, we were just on different pages around urgency, right. My co-founder and I.
Yep.
So, we were probably operating in a very non-official way, but
very
looked
creative
official.
way.
Yeah, exactly. Most of the tours were run through the hotel as opposed to an actual, independently registered tour company.
Gotcha.
So
Yep.
that's cool. After a year and a half, it wasn't where I needed it to be, so decided to come back to Australia.
And before you go on, how did you determine that? What told you that it wasn't where you needed it to be?
Yeah, so it was around, how much money we were making.
Okay.
I knew what it took to, build my retirement plan, and
Right.
it wasn't where I needed it to be.
Okay.
And also I think just divergence around the number of tours and the quality of tours and the commitment from my co-founder around that. At the end of the day, it's hard when you've got multiple businesses to juggle. So my co-founder was split, or, he was working, he had some, political interests. He had a couple of businesses.
Okay.
And I really wanted probably somebody who was a little bit more invested in the business to be working alongside me, particularly as somebody who didn't really have much professional experience coming out of uni, and working in a foreign country with another language.
Yeah.
Had those different sets of criteria, decided, that I probably had better prospects for my career back in Australia with the context that I had. When I came back, selling what I had done in Colombia was actually quite difficult. It was, we had the website still up, we had the social media following, but I suppose, the confidence from my side had really been knocked by the fact that I hadn't built the business to what I wanted it to be.
Right.
So presenting, what I'd done and to new employers or recruiters, I guess it just didn't convey that well.
Right. So you weren't that proud of it?
No, I'm proud
Really?
now.
Okay.
But at the time when I came back, I was really disheartened by the fact that I hadn't, I had failed in my mind.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So it took me a while to get, the confidence or the pride back in reviewing that experience. So when I, was going for jobs, trying to sell my digital marketing experience or my business acumen, it just didn't translate. So the type of roles that I wanted to get, I guess I wasn't qualified for based on my experience. It's a very entrepreneurial thing to move overseas and, try and start your own company.
Yep.
And most employers were looking for a bit more professional experience. Fair enough.
Oh,
so
right.
I sort of fell into digital recruitment.
Yep.
Worked at an agency here in Brisbane, and did that for a year. And for anybody who knows anything about digital recruitment or recruitment in general, it's like you're thrown into the deep end and sink or swim.
Yeah.
So it was a great experience in building resilience.
Oh, right.
Would be the best way to describe it.
So you're referring to the Colombia part or the part when you got back?
Got back and got into digital recruitment.
Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like it was an interesting sort of professional experience for me in those couple of years. Like it was probably a really tough start for me. I didn't. Yeah. And that's definitely leads on to where I found my feet and my passion with women in digital. Yep. I wanted to, I guess I'll continue the story with the recruitment side of things. Yep. So, after about a year of recruitment, I was going out meeting clients. They would explain that they struggled to find women for these tech roles, and also when I had female candidates come to me, I had a real mixed bag of candidates, as you might expect, and a lot of the females that would come for roles or early grads they wouldn't have the same confidence that an equivalently aged or skilled guy would have. Yep. So I just saw this real divergence and this need or this craving for a little bit more of a confidence boost for these younger girls. Yep. And a bit more support. Yep. And that was definitely what I identified with. Right. So one of my female clients was an exec from Deloitte. And she ended up, I thought I was just going to do some recruitment for her, and she ended up inviting me out for coffee and was, really supportive. And at that stage, it was just what I needed. Yeah. And so I wanted to be able to give that experience back to other young women. It was.
Did you ever struggle with that yourself?
The confidence?
Yeah. Do you think there would have been a time when you didn't back yourself like an equally skilled male may have?
Yeah, 100%.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely. But I think that comes from, experiences where you have really high expectations of how it's going to turn out. Yeah. And for me anyway, when it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, I go, that knocked the confidence out of out of my sale.
Yeah.
So I definitely carried that forward.
Right.
And so as much as I, saw that these girls or some of these candidates that would come to me didn't have confidence, I identified with that, of course. I was well aware of that. So I got so much out of that
right.
mentoring experience that I wanted to be able to pay it forward. And, it's that's where Women in Digital started. It was basically me calling up the other clients that I had that I thought might be interested and saying, hey, I've got this idea to offer mentoring. Would you be interested in getting involved? And so, where I could, I would just connect mentors and mentees. And it was really satisfying. It's a really nice thing when you can help somebody. So like professionally and personally though, because I think, as much as we try and split the two, our professional lives and our personal lives, it does really feed into our self-esteem and our self-worth,
totally
our
agree.
Professional success.
100%.
Yeah.
So what about, how did you deal, I don't know if it was like that at the time, but there is a little bit of a stigma around recruiting as well, right?
Yeah.
How was that, what was that like to push through that stigma when you first got into the game?
Well, I think that's why like another thing that I struggled with in that year was around, that feeling of how could I be a salesperson after the experiences that I've had. I've got a degree from a good university and I.
Why am I selling stuff?
Yeah, exactly. I'm selling people.
Yeah.
I'm a people peddler. I suppose that was one of the things the mentor helped me with.
Yeah.
So she would say to me, why do you feel bad about being a salesperson? Salespeople are the lifeblood of the company. It's a very important skill to have, if you want to have your own business long term. And because I respected her so much, it's all very well for your parents to say to you, we're so proud of you, you're doing so well, or, your friends in your life. But to have, somebody who you really admire say, you're doing great and you should be proud of your abilities.
And she probably didn't have to, right? She didn't have to tell you were doing well. Like your friends and family, they sort of have to. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, they have to be supportive.
Yeah.
And so, for her to like pick up the phone and call me and say, do you want to grab a coffee?
Yep.
It's like, oh, this actually counts. This is, she's got better things to do, for sure. So her validation was important. And,
cool.
it's I guess, we all like to get validated, I believe. So mentoring helps with that.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I, hated about sales was the fact that it seems unskilled. So I had one of the first clients that I approached to do some recruitment for, ended up getting back in touch a year on and said, hey, we know that you've done some marketing in the past and, you're passionate about digital. So do you want to come on board and do some digital marketing for us? So I was like, yes, absolutely. Give me some skilled work.
Yeah.
I'm out there.
Yeah.
So I spent the next couple of years working in digital marketing and didn't want to let the Women in Digital project die. So I just, continued to keep my finger in the pie and run these events over 2014-15. It was, it's also a nice way to keep educating myself around digital marketing if I was working in it. I don't know. You must get a lot out of the events that you run.
Yeah, well, I think it is important to be sort of doing your own business stuff as well.
Yeah.
For credibility and just to sort of understand,
Yeah.
Well, that's what I found anyway.
Yeah.
Is so that you can relate better. I'm not just some MC.
You're much more than that.
So much more. Thank you, Holly. Thanks for the validation. All right. So you're saying you started Women in Digital in 2014, is that right?
End of 2014.
Yeah. So it sounds like that you're helping women value themselves more. You're helping you're helping them have faith in their skills.
Yeah.
But and I'm obviously stereotyping when I say women. Like that's not every woman.
No,
we know that. But why is there a need for this?
Well, I think women and men definitely need support and validation. And the reason why, Women in Digital exists is because I can relate to that.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are lots of, men's groups out there, like the Men's Shed, for example. It's a support, it's a community group. It's just about identifying with like-minded people who might have issues that, you can relate to. So I don't think it's just a women's issue. And our events, I suppose, I just look at areas where we can offer professional or personal development and where I know there's a need. So, research indicates that women generally are paid a little bit less, for a similar role.
Yep.
So we had an event earlier in the year with Matt Wallart from Microsoft, who was over from New York, who is very passionate about pay equality.
Yep.
So he just spoke about, why that issue exists and what women can do to negotiate salaries in the same way that a man does.
Yeah, yeah.
So, the other events are more around, okay, we'll get a panel together to talk about innovation strategies. Yep. So that's nothing to do with gender. We have men coming along for the event. It's just around professional development and upskilling.
Right. Okay, so you say that Matt from Microsoft come and talked about why that exists.
Yeah.
Why does it exist? Why is there a gap? Well, I think it's called, I've heard the gender pay gap.
Yeah.
You hear it in the media a bit. I don't know a whole lot about it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've done a small bit of research, but not huge amounts. So why does that happen?
Well, from what he was saying, it's about how women and men approach the negotiation discussion.
Right.
And, he was saying that men are a little bit more strategic around looking at the band that they are in for their role and always just highballing what their expectations are.
Yep.
Whereas women, I suppose, from what he was saying, because I don't want to generalize and say this is every woman.
Yep.
I definitely was more masculine in my pay negotiations when I was working for somebody.
Yep.
Women will go, oh, well, that's the pay bracket. I don't want to be greedy. I'll just ask for what's fair. Whereas men will go, no, I'm going to ask for the top because I expect it. And also when negotiating a higher salary within a role, men will typically, I guess, reason from a business case perspective. So they will say, this is the revenue that I'm bringing to you. I want a larger share of that. Whereas women will approach it from a more emotional perspective and say, I've been very loyal.
Right.
I work very hard. I do these hours. I think it's just around looking at, at the end of the day, if you work for a company, they're pursuing commercial objectives.
Yep.
And, anybody, men, women, children can approach, a negotiation from just looking at it from the other person's perspective.
Yep.
So that's what he was saying. Women just need to be a little bit more diligent about recording that business value that they're bringing and focusing on that. Because, stereotypically, women are a little bit more emotive and they look at things from a more, a relationship skew.
Yeah.
That's probably our failing when it comes to working in the commercial world.
Right. So you think it does have like a biological component to some extent?
To some extent, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But also, I think like last time we spoke, I did mention this, that I think it's about learned behaviour as well. So when you speak to your parents, I think, males generally have their father as a role model to speak to about pay negotiation, and they would have that experience. Whereas if you have a chat to your mum, or I know my mum was a stay-at-home mum, so she wouldn't have those same strategies or techniques to offer around pay negotiation. So I think over time, it's about learned behaviour and just approaching the workforce in a more gender-neutral way, right? It shouldn't, gender shouldn't be. It shouldn't come into the equation at all.
And it is hard to argue with the numbers, though, right? Like if you bring that to the table, it's sort of. Hard to argue with that.
But then, if I always think or wonder about this whole, pay discrepancy. If you have a company that's trying to save money, they're trying to maximize profit, and you have somebody asking for a lower amount, what is the commercial, why would a company go, all right, well, no, actually you deserve more.
Yeah.
You only get what you ask for.
Yeah. Interesting. I've one thing I did notice, and I'm not going to mention the industry, but I thought that with my very limited knowledge on the topic, that it might be just the case at times that this is just there's sort of structures in place that are hard to overcome. Like,
Yeah.
and the example I'm thinking of is, I know a lot of companies in this industry have a lot of men on their boards.
Yeah.
And it's not, and there's a couple of women on their boards too, but it's not that they, I think, were leaving them out of things deliberately, but they'd go to the pub together, right? And they just want to hang out with the boys, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, if there's only one woman on the board, even though they're not actively trying to, be nasty to it per se, like she just might not really appreciate that environment. Like,
Absolutely.
and they're all having a good time together. But then you think about, how do you change that? Because it'd be very difficult to justify throwing out 3 people off a board and putting in, because they're men, and then bringing in 3 women to like
100%.
overturn that structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was reading a little bit about the discomfort around diversity over the weekend.
All right.
It is uncomfortable to work with people who challenge you. So, I guess the positive outcome of diversity is that you're pushed to think differently.
Yep.
But who likes to think differently? Who
Yeah.
likes to be challenged? I
Yep.
think we all surround ourselves with like-minded people, don't we?
Yeah.
And so, what you really need, like a HR police officer to come in and say,
Yeah.
no, we need to, manage these quotas, and we need to make sure we've got this equal representation.
Yeah.
But, your natural default and your subconscious bias generally pulls like-minded people towards you.
Yeah.
So you can understand how it happens, and you can understand why, naturally you want to work with people you like.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a real catch-22, because you recruit a diverse team, and if you don't have within the company a good culture around inclusion, acceptance, and
It's not going to work.
it's not going to work.
Yeah,
People
okay.
just churn.
Yeah. Wow. So, all right. So I want to talk about then, what does success look like in this? So you're helping women value themselves and realize their skills and all that. What would make you say, I did it, I made it?
Yeah. Oh, that's a tough question.
All the tough questions here, Holly.
Well, a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I've got, revenue targets around how much money I want to make.
Yep.
So there are the commercial realities of the business that I need to meet.
Sure.
I also, those anecdotal cases where I know that, a mentoring experience has changed somebody's career.
Mm-hmm.
To me, to be able to affect 1,000 people's lives next year, that to me would get me to the end of 2017 and say, I've had a positive impact, and that's success. That looks like a successful 2017.
Cool.
It's about... Yeah, I mean, it's with the mentoring experience again. It's like what's the return on diversity? Yeah. Well, how do you say that you've successfully impacted somebody's life? I mean, or somebody's professional life? Mm-hmm. There's never going to be like a one clear cut answer. Yeah. But if 1,000 people come to me, or I'm able to gather at least 1,000 cases where somebody's either attributed their promotion to something that they've learnt and their skills that they've been able to develop through Women in Digital, that's to me success. Or somebody has been able to negotiate their pay rise and they attribute that to learnings from Women in Digital. Yeah, cool. Or if I've been able to get somebody a job that they might never have dreamt of, that's success. And I've got members within my network who really they might have one title, like a digital marketing coordinator. Yep. And they have no idea that they're actually quite qualified to go for a digital marketing manager role. Right, okay. Because I guess, there's every company use different role titles, different terminologies. Yeah. So if I'm able to sort of help somebody dig through that translation and get them to the next step in their career, and feel like they're progressing in their, professional and personal world, then that's awesome. Yeah, that's satisfying.
Brilliant. All right. So do you have any stories of times when you felt that you or someone you knew were judged on gender and that got in the way of you, like a time you had to push through?
Yeah. One of my digital marketing roles, I was reporting into a CTO who knew what I was doing with Women in Digital and knew where I was taking it. Yep. And he said to me, I don't get this whole like diversity thing. What's it all about? At the end of the day, it just doesn't make sense. Like you've got a man and you've got a woman. They both go to learn programming, for example. Yep. And in a year's time, the man's just going to be a better programmer.
Yeah.
Like it just, their brains are hardwired to think more rationally. And I was absolutely dumbfounded by that.
Yeah.
I actually just didn't bother really responding. I said,
Yep.
I don't actually agree with that, and I think your opinion is quite naive.
Mm-hmm.
But
were you angry?
Yeah, I was quite angry. I really was, because that's just, just blatant discrimination, and so condescending, so
Unfounded.
incredibly
Yeah.
condescending.
Yeah.
But some people just have their inbuilt assumptions.
Yeah.
And I suppose, the blessing or the interesting thing is that he actually was brave enough to externalize that. A lot of people hold those opinions and never share them.
Interesting. Would you prefer him to have said it then?
Yes.
Really?
100%. Yes.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. I think own your opinions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you think? He should have kept them to himself?
Oh, God.
I think it was quite brave, him knowing that I was really, an ambassador for diversity, and I
Yep.
thought women should get more involved in tech, and that it would, it was a positive step for society to
Yep.
push women towards programming and development, more technical fields.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was quite brave of him to voice that with me. I mean,
Yep.
maybe he was up for World War III,
Yeah.
but I think at the end of the day, he would have held on to those assumptions long term.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Okay, no, I would actually probably agree with you. I think I'd probably prefer to know what someone thought.
Yeah.
And at least I can go, well, at least you're honest.
Yeah.
I might not agree with anything else you say, but
Absolutely.
at least you're honest. And it's probably, we've seen a lot of, even this year with the US election and all that, I'm not sure if the whole shutting down opposing opinions works. Because I don't know if anyone saw that result coming, but
I know.
yeah,
So shocking.
So yeah, I've kind of maybe in the last couple of months I've rethought about I've thought about that stuff a lot actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm probably in agreement with you there. So
Yeah.
really
yeah.
cool. But I totally, when you tell that story about how you were judged on what you were like born as opposed to what you've done or what your potential because you're a woman.
And it's just assumptions.
Yeah. But I mean, the same thing happened to me with singing. Like everyone thought you can sing or you can't. You'll never be a singer. You're not a
Really?
singer. Like this binary, like because
You're
you
either a
weren't
singer or
born
you're
a
not.
singer. Yeah.
Really.
And so I suppose I can kind of relate on that point, and it's just
Yeah.
the most frustrating thing to hear.
Yeah.
But then again, I suppose you can use that to really fuel you and go, all right, well, I'll show you.
100%. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. So you wanted to
sing,
get involved and do more singing lessons and develop a career there?
Yeah, I played guitar, and it was so annoying because the singer has so much power in a band, right?
Yeah.
Because they're in demand, and there's guitarists
focal
around,
point.
and and you can learn guitar, you can learn drums, you can learn everything else apparently, but you can't learn to sing. So I was like, wouldn't it be good if I just sung? I wouldn't have to rely on other people. So I started doing it, and everyone tells you can't.
Yeah.
And it did take a long time.
Yeah.
But
But it's like anything, it's training.
But if you actually break it down, right? So what is it about me that stops me from singing? And I'm not sure it's the same with you. What is it? What about the woman part stops me from coding?
Yeah.
If you actually break it down and go, well, I've got lungs, I've got vocal cords,
100%.
I can talk. I figured out how to do that. I can, and then
And you learnt to talk.
Exactly.
There's structure to singing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can do vocal exercises. You can train. You can practice.
Exactly.
I think it's just about having the dedication.
Yeah.
And the passion for it. My brother is the same.
Right.
He started out a terrible singer.
Yeah.
And I know because we lived so close together in the
Right.
house.
Yeah, yeah.
And he would practice and practice and practice, and now he's got a beautiful voice.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So it's worth it, and like you say, it's fuel for the fire.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just trying to break down. It's the brain's wired differently in a woman, and that stops her from coding. It just sort of seems I don't have as good a rebuttal to that because that's just
No.
it just seems weird though to say something like that.
Yeah, it's very naive. And I think
Yeah.
those sort of attitudes are kind of being, slowly broken down.
Yeah.
At the end of the day now, I think the important part is the push to get more women into tech roles and get girls interested in more technical subjects from an earlier age.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's around breaking down for girls what that geek career looks like.
Yeah.
And that it can be quite exciting to work in tech. It's not just about working in a dark room in a dungeon, basically, and sitting on the computer all day. Exactly.
With the guy wearing glasses and got his popcorn next to him. Yeah. We all know the stereotype.
Yeah.
All right. I'd be interested in knowing, is your advice to women that they should do things that I suppose a female would do better? Like, I did some research for this episode, and there's a lot of, anything a man can do, a woman can do, and for the most part, it's probably true. Yeah. And but sometimes, like for example, the example I'm thinking of is that I do some voiceover work, but this company I did with, they wanted a female voice, right? And it was my sister who did the work, and she's like, "Oh, but my voice is so high and all this stuff." I was like, "No, but that's what they want. Like, they don't want my slow drone. They want your, high, like energetic voice." Yeah. So, is there times when a woman can use what's, I suppose, innately female to do something not the way a man would, like do it in a way that only a woman can, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, one of the most in-demand roles is, a UX designer. Okay. And that takes, I guess, interpersonal skills, a lot of empathy, and, a real passion or care for how people feel and experience, for example, a website or an app. Yeah. And so I think, in that instance where you have a UX designer, females innately have that stronger empathy, and I don't want to say that men don't have empathy. They absolutely do. Yeah. But I think women in those that sort of role is highly sought after. Yeah. Because it's just a natural it's a natural tendency. Mm-hmm. So I mean, what's your question? I've gone back.
And just the question is, do you encourage women to not look at that as a weakness, but actually a strength or a point of difference, to do it in a way, I suppose, a feminine way? Yeah, do a role or approach something in a, like in the example of the voiceover, right? Yeah. That wasn't discriminatory in my opinion. That was just
what they needed for them.
Yeah, her voice is an octave higher than mine. Like that's just the way it is,
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I sort of think, yes, absolutely. Yep. In the same way, we should review all of our skills and abilities. Whatever we can attribute those skills and abilities to that relate to being female, we should use those and be proud of those. In the same way, it's the same for men. Guys who are really practical, great with their hands, and love building things, should really own that and push their building career. Yeah. So I guess it's, I'd like to take gender off the table with that and just say whatever we're good at, we should do, because, we're going to enjoy it more and we're going to be better at it. Yeah.
And do you think that's happening? Do you think gender is moving off the table? Because, I mean, like, I'm probably a bad example again, because I spend a lot of time freelancing. I don't work closely with a lot of people, but I'm really surprised to hear a lot, and I have heard some crazy stories, like like being propositioned in the workplace and crazy harassment stuff, which is just blows my mind, because I just don't see it. So I mean, easy to go, oh, does that happen? But do you think it's happening? Do you think we are moving gender off the table? Do you think that it's heading the right direction?
I think so. I definitely think so. I don't know that it's being taken off the table, but I believe there is, I guess, more conversation happening around why it's important to bring women into the workforce and bring women into, roles that they might not have traditionally been well represented in. And that, for the most part, men and women are very accepting of the equality of skills and abilities that women bring to the table. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, I'm really surprised that of the amount of discrimination that some people claim. Not all, but it really does surprise me, because I just don't notice it, but I don't see it a lot of the time. I see the stats, like I've seen a few stats, but I don't see the actual output of that.
Yeah, I'm hearing less stories, and maybe I just don't get told them. But I honestly feel, a few years ago, that there was a lot more discrimination out there against women. But sexual harassment, it can happen to men, it can happen to women, it can happen, there's definitely a real move and a real appreciation of what women bring to the workforce, from my experience anyway.
Yeah.
Like I sort of said before, I think the big push is to just get more girls interested in science and tech subjects.
Yeah.
Because like workforces and men in hiring positions are they're the ones that I speak to are dying to get more women into the workforce and into technical roles.
Mm-hmm. And at networking events as well, like there's still a few like tech events I'll go to that they are still predominantly men, that will attend. But a lot of them whinge that there's no women there.
Absolutely.
So, it's not, sometimes it's not that they don't want them there. It's just, I don't know, you do have to sometimes maybe put in a bit of effort to make it appealing to everyone.
Exactly.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
But
which comes back to so recently I ran an event and the panel was on customer experience.
Yep.
To begin with, I had 2 men and 2 women on the panel. Unfortunately, one of the women couldn't attend. She had a work function on the same night. So, last minute pull out, I couldn't find another woman to be on the panel and ended up having 3 men on the panel and 1 woman.
Yep.
And received a bit of slack on LinkedIn.
Right.
And so, I had to keep defending myself and saying, I tried, I did what I could.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I just couldn't find another female speaker.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot more attention. So, for me, that was great that there was a lot of attention being thrown to the diversity on the panel.
Yep.
And the fact that it was an important issue both for men and women who were getting involved in the discussion.
Yeah.
On the other side, I was like, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
I've tried, guys. Back off.
Yeah. It isn't always easy. I remember running an event where I just couldn't get women. I really couldn't.
Yeah, that was that VC one.
Yeah, so venture capital in Australia, I don't think there's a whole lot of women in the space. And the ones I asked, I said, do you know any others? There's not many of us.
Yeah. We have a dinner once a year and there's 5 of us, so good luck.
So yeah, it makes it kind of hard sometimes.
Yeah,
But yeah, like, I mean, for the most part, I reckon a lot of people are behind it.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's...
No.
Maybe that's me being all utopian, but a lot of people, men and women, are happy to
definitely
for diversity and
100%. I mean, with Women in Digital, I have networks in different locations. One of those networks is in Bangladesh,
right?
And I know there's really blatant discrimination there, and there's I've heard of conversations where this one woman, Nilla, that I work with, asked for a pay rise in her previous role, and she was point blank told, why would you possibly need more money? You don't, you don't run a household, you're not a man.
Yeah.
So it's those sort of attitudes which, we don't, fortunately, I mean, I haven't heard of that happening in Australia.
Yeah.
So, in some ways, when I put it in perspective, I like to think that we're quite progressive.
Yeah. And so where are you situated around the world? Where's Women in Digital?
We've got networks in Australia, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne. In the US in Silicon Valley.
Yep.
Over in Toronto, Canada, and Tel Aviv in Israel.
Brilliant. And how did all that come about?
Yeah, it was a bit of a mishmash. So Brisbane was the first Women in Digital location, and I had a friend she's French, and she was living in Australia. When I came back from Colombia, I desperately tried to get as much professional experience as I could. So I interned at the Australian Institute of International Affairs.
Oh, right.
It's a bit of a think tank and academic body.
Cool.
So there I met a lot of foreigners and I was in my element.
Yeah.
And one of these...
Colombia's coming in handy.
Yeah, I know. As many stamps on the passport as possible. So I basically stayed in contact with her. She's French. She'd moved to Israel, and we were still in contact over Facebook and LinkedIn, and she saw what I was doing with Women in Digital Brisbane, and she said, well, I've just started a business where I help companies expand into the Asia Pacific. So, for me, it's a great opportunity to build my network if I replicated what you're doing in Brisbane. So how about it? And to me, I trust her. I know her work ethic, having worked with her at that organisation.
Yep.
So she launched, that was our second location. From there, Women in Digital Melbourne started through a mutual contact.
Okay.
Silicon Valley launched after a trip to South by Southwest
Cool.
earlier in the year. So
Yep.
ended up doing a bit of a road trip from San Fran and Silicon Valley through to Austin, Texas.
Brilliant.
So much fun.
Yeah.
So much fun. And, when we're in Silicon Valley, I went with another contact who was just brilliant at hunting down the right people and getting these meetings. So
Right.
we met a woman from LinkedIn, and she
Wow.
said that she was really keen to run the network over there.
Yep.
So it's just been, each is a case by case basis.
Yep.
Toronto was after somebody saw what we were doing and reached out to me. And after a few Skype conversations, I could see what she was trying to, where she and her values
Yep.
were. So it all aligned.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool. So any particularly challenging times when you've been building Women in Digital and spreading out to all these locations?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound easy.
Well, it's been easier than than it sounds, to be
Okay.
honest.
All right.
But the challenges have definitely been around structure
Yep.
and trying to ensure that each location has the same sort of type of events,
Yep.
and that I've been able to get the right people on board.
Yep.
So I suppose being too trusting has been a fault or
really?
a downfall
Okay.
in not having, done my due diligence on one particular director.
Yep.
And, they went off and started their own network in a similar vein.
Right.
And, just hadn't legally protected myself in the
Right.
right way. So
Yep.
that was a good learning. And I'm glad I had that learning nice and early on in the piece with
Yeah.
Women in Digital. And it really taught me to tighten up all my operations and get my paperwork in order.
Yep. So you'd say you'd change the operational side of it.
Absolutely.
But what about the, I suppose, the character side of it? Would you
Yeah.
test anything for character differently, or do you think that would have been hard to pick up?
I think in the future will probably do multiple, or have done, multiple checks on people.
Yep.
This was just, a mutual contact
Yeah.
that introduced me. So I just went for one person's word on it.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
As opposed to going, okay, great. Well, and from here we're going to have a chat with a few more people. And,
Yeah.
I suppose I overrode my gut instinct in that instance based on this person's
Really?
introduction.
Your gut told you not to do it?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I think,
Okay.
yeah. So that was just, it was around, okay, number one, you need to trust your gut because you know the type of people that you want to surround yourself with.
Yep.
And number two, make sure your legality and your paperwork is watertight.
So you're safe. Wow.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about the moment that your gut was like, don't know about this? If you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the personality fit, I think it's, as much as we're talking about diversity, this is one
Yep.
of these catch-22 situations actually,
Right.
that, this person was quite uptight
Okay.
and very, for lack of a better word, anal.
Okay.
And so I think I'm generally quite laid back and relaxed.
Sure.
So my brain told me, it overrode my gut and said, you need this type of person in your
right.
organization.
Okay.
But in the end, it was sort of a bit of it was just a bit of a clash because, that sort of personality was alienating and we didn't end up clicking
Right.
work-wise. And, they went off and started a similar network.
Yeah. It won't be as good, don't worry.
Ever.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No, perfect introduction. Yeah. It's one of those things. It's, you have to sort of appreciate what you're not good at, and the fact that those personalities that are different from you can, have a really positive influence on your business.
Yep.
So maybe, it wouldn't have been a bad thing to have that person involved if I had covered myself.
Oh, really?
Property.
Okay.
It's a case-by-case basis.
Yep. Okay. So do you have, what's the diversity like in your team now? Like, do you have people with a similar character to yours, or do you have those anal people, as you say?
Yeah.
What's the breakdown?
Yeah. No, I definitely have some, really anal people in there. But that's a positive
I don't know why
thing.
that sounds so
I
weird.
know.
But
That's going to be in the introduction for the show.
Yeah, I'll put that at the start.
No, absolutely. Like I really do believe that you need to have a mix of personalities and, you know, a diverse range. So in the team, we've got people with different, you know, a diverse range of skills and abilities and urgency. You know, we've got some really creative people who probably don't think about urgency in the same way that the others who are used to scheduling and you know, automation quite the same way. But you need that mix. It's just, I think, around bringing people into the team and having a structure and a really set agenda for what their role in the organisation is. And I suppose when I brought this person on board, I didn't have that. So as much as I blame that person, I also blame myself, and it was a good learning around how I should run a team and a company.
Right. Setting all those rules and guidelines is so boring, though.
So boring. so boring. And it's very, you know, I guess it's one thing to articulate it verbally and have a conversation, and it's another thing to say, and here is the guide and here is the breakdown, and, you know, to send it across and have a contract in place. That clearly articulates all of the expectations, not just, you know, okay, well, this is, you know, an overview of what we're doing. You know, I think it's about the thoroughness, and I've never been that detail oriented.
Right.
And I've, you know, had to learn to be.
Yeah. So would you say you are now?
No, but I guess I have my, I don't like naturally lean that way.
Yeah.
But I know what detail I need to go through and get into place with my business.
Right. Because I'm similar. I'm not very good with the
odd deets?
No. Oh, not really. At times, sometimes. I really hate getting the data, but I really like analysing the data.
Yeah.
I hate being in the trenches and like
digging
it up and putting it together, but I love reading it once it's there.
Yeah, absolutely. I know what you mean.
I'm one of those people that needs like a VA and stuff. So
it's like doing bookkeeping.
Yeah.
You know, you get to the end of it and you're like, oh, that's so good. I know where I stand.
Yeah.
But the thought of starting it is horrible.
So boring.
Yeah.
That's not why we get into business, right?
No, exactly. And I like to think that, you know, that's one of the reasons why we are successful in some areas. You know, you've got to ride your strength. So that sort of, I guess, you know, one of the reasons why I've been able to just go, all right, well, I'm going to start my own business is because I didn't think too much about, you know, the risks. I think it's easy to be a personality that overanalyzes the risks and never does anything. You're paralyzed by fear of what could go wrong. So it's a catch-22. You know, there are pros and cons both ways.
That's a really good point. Actually, I remember when I started my first business and I'd read the 4-hour work week. I was like, sweet, I'm doing it. I'll do this for 6 months and then I'll be on the beach just tapping away on my...
Pina coladas.
Pina coladas, all that, tapping away on my keyboard. But that naivety like sent me broke pretty quickly. Because I also...
Put the urgency into you, didn't it?
Yeah, well, and I also just picked out the parts of the book that I wanted. You know, that whole market research and validating stuff. I was like, oh, no, I won't worry about that. I'll do the fun stuff.
I am the market. I'm validating it.
Exactly. Why would people not want to buy whatever it is that I want to sell? So yeah, I can definitely relate to that because I wouldn't change that. I mean, I'm glad that I completely screwed everything up and and you know got kicked in the you know where and you know, stood up again and
absolutely. I mean, adversity drives you to be creative and you know work harder. So there's always a positive outcome for, you know, what we go through. And I don't think there's one person in this world who hasn't been through adversity or hasn't, you know, struggled in their business in some way. You know, you could be very detail oriented and be like, okay, we've crunched the numbers and this is the financial outcome that we're going to end up with. But then, you know, if you can't relate to people and you can't speak to your customer who may be, you know, a business client or, you know, an end customer, if you can't get that piece right, then it doesn't matter how detail-oriented or how well you can crunch the numbers. You need to keep those customers buying in some way.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay, so I ask this every podcast, and this is a perfect segue into it. What is your relationship like with self-doubt?
Improving by the day.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
You guys are seeing other people? Or?
We've decided to take some time out.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
It's it's one of those things. I suppose you know, self-doubt does you no good. And I've really learnt to shut that voice down.
Oh, really? Yeah.
You know, I think it's easy to sort of, if you dwell on self-doubt, it becomes it just becomes a domineering voice in your head. So I guess I made a really conscious effort a couple of years ago to just shut that voice down as soon as it started and think about something else, or think more positively about, the challenge that I was having and how I could be more outcome focused or results oriented, or what I could problem solving, instead of going, oh, this is going really badly, this is because you're bad, or,
beating yourself up.
Yeah, exactly. Instead think, right, okay, well, you're not that good at it. What are you going to do to change it?
Yeah. Okay. So was that something you were able to just be conscious of and shut down?
Yeah, to be honest, it didn't happen overnight.
Yeah, okay.
But it's definitely something that took me some time to kind of nail out. And it's not like I don't have those voices now that, say, oh, this isn't going well, what have you done wrong or something. But I think just being conscious of the fact that it's something that I need to cut out, and I'm the only one who's in control of my mind, and that negative voices or self-doubt will never get you to a more positive situation. Yeah.
I should take that on board. I'm such a sook sometimes.
Are you?
Yeah. Such a sook, yeah. Something goes wrong and it's like the voice in your head that you remember, that's because you suck. That's why.
Yeah. I think we all experience that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm sure everybody's had a different experience with shutting out self-doubt, but I mean, I've definitely found that just focusing on what I can do differently instead of what I've done wrong has worked for me.
And what about, you talked about your parents earlier on, but how good is their support being over the years? Because, this isn't the type of thing that necessarily parents like to say. Well, I don't know if they necessarily mean harm by it, but they're scared, right? Oh, that sounds risky, and why don't you just get a job? And, don't do the entrepreneurial thing. It sounds like your parents were very encouraging.
Definitely. And which has, been an absolute blessing.
Yeah.
But also I think, it would have been great if they were a little bit more bad cop. Like,
oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. You need to have a balance.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate their support and the fact that they've always encouraged me to be entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need the reality check. I think, we all need somebody who's saying, like, are you sure you're making the right decision there? So,
Yeah.
It's a balance.
Yeah. And do you have those people in your life at the moment?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I do. And I think, that mentor that I mentioned, she was really good at saying that. You're like this, you need to collect these people around you.
Yeah, okay.
And it doesn't mean they have to be in your inner circle, your best friends, but you need to have those people to help balance you out and available for support.
Right.
So, she's got a few there was a lawyer who's sort of my age, a girl, and she said, I'm going to make sure that you two are connected so that if you need legal support moving forward, that's who you go to. And I can tell that your personalities will work together.
Ah, cool.
And I think, so over the year it's been a learning. And I don't think, some people are blessed with this, a circle of people around them that, are perfectly matched. Other people, it's a conscious effort. For me, it's a conscious effort.
Right. Okay. And so to be able to take this advice on board, though, you need to have some self-awareness. You need to have some humility, which is not things that came naturally to me at all. Okay. Because you can get criticised, right, and take it really personally and be like, no, that's not something I did wrong. That's because I suck, and take it like as a person.
Yeah.
Were you able to take criticism? Were you always able to do that?
No, not at all. I think I would have internalized a lot of criticism over the years, definitely. Yeah. And even now, it's not, I'm not like a dais and able to just
not excited to hear
not
it.
like Teflon and be like, oh, whatever, I'm cool. I definitely get a bit shut down if I get some criticism.
Right.
But I suppose I've just made a real conscious effort after being a little bit beaten down by that self-criticism and that and that external criticism as well, to go, all right, well, what do I need to do better, and how can I just I'm going to accept that I'm crap at that, and what am I going to do differently, and how am I overcome that? Yeah. So just trying to work with the criticism as opposed to against it and letting it defeat me.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. How do you find you get the wind back in your sail after a couple of weeks, or how do you deal with that?
No, I'm more at the position now where I've gone too far the other way, where I can take the emotion completely out of it all together, which it's just like, so it doesn't hurt you at all, but then
that sounds good though.
It is until you have to sort of relate to people again and like, you know, actually.
So from Monday 5 to 6 p.m. for the podcast, you're like, and now is my relate time.
Yeah. Turn on that, you know, EQ. Let's just push that up a few points for this. But seriously, like because I used to take things so personally, and then I'm like, stop doing that. But I went all the way the other way, that I'm like,
Really?
like nothing.
Yeah.
And you sort of become very robotic. And now I'm realizing that, you know, that has its own problems because people don't want to talk to a robot.
Hey,
or buy from a robot.
You're a pretty interesting robot today, so this is working.
Yeah,
You've got the lever right up.
200%. Yeah.
That's not easy.
Anyway, this has been amazing. Thanks so much for being with us today, Holly.
No,
it's
thanks, Jack.
Been great fun.
Yeah.
Where's some places we can find out about you and about the projects that you're in your business?
Yep. On Twitter, WID_AUS.
Yep.
Facebook, Women in Digital.
Yep.
And Digital Talent Co. is my recruitment agency.
Cool.
So you can find me Digital Talent Co. and that's the same on Instagram.
Yep.
I'll send you my links as well in case you have some show notes.
Yeah, no, I'll put it on the show notes. That's fine.
Okay, awesome.
Holly, congratulations on everything you're doing. It sounds fantastic.
Thank you.
And it was amazing to have you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Be The Push podcast. Show notes can be found at bethepush.com/podcast and clicking on the relevant episode link. I appreciate your company and look forward to talking to you again soon.